Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and what you see soaking down here inside this bucket of water is one of those so-called mosquito dunks. So I think mosquito dunks is just the brand name for it, but it's a bacteria called BTI. I don't want to try to pronounce the actual name of the bacteria, but that's really what does the magic in terms of knocking out mosquitoes, gnats, and stuff like that. So even though it's marketed as being for mosquitoes, my aim is to try to reduce gnats down here in my wormery, because that's just been a thing that's been going on for a while, and a lot of people have indicated that the mosquito dunks stuff really works well. So we're going to give that a try now. At this point, all my systems have been treated with that stuff, all but these 3 yellow buckets here. These are the last ones on my rotation. We had settled into a 14-day feeding interval, so it's only every 2 weeks that we come in to feed these. And today they're finally due to get fed. Oh, look at that. Looks like one of our buckets is protected by this little guy over here. Let me see if I could shoo him off before we bring these buckets up on the bench to get fed. You'll see over here I've got a whole bunch of yummy stuff set up for them. They've been getting citrus. They got grapefruit, they got lemons. So today they're going to get strawberry, blackberry, banana, coffee, and a little sprinkle of the BTI. A little bit of splash of the bacteria to make sure that now at this point all of my systems are treated with this stuff. So let's get them up on the bench and get them fed. Okay, are you ready? 3, 2, 1. All right, we usually check in on these systems in order. This is the one that we labeled as bin number 1. The last feeding 14 days ago consisted of being 3 rotting lemons for each system. And those poor lemons had already been starting to deteriorate and turn into lemon juice in my refrigerator. I thought I caught a little whiff of lemony scent. So, like I usually do, I'm indicating where we last fed using this coffee filter, and then we're going to actually switch the feeding location, as we always do. So the last feeding 14 days ago of lemon would be under here, and then we'll open up the feeding previous, which was 28 days ago, another 14 days prior to that, on the opposite side, which was similar. They got a big grapefruit cut in half, and that was put in there. So I wonder how that's coming along. Before we open up the grapefruit side to see how that's coming along, since that's the side we're feeding today's bounty of delicious fruits on, we're gonna take a quick peek, see how those lemons are coming along. Oh, I already see one of them. There's the second one, and there's the third one. Each bin was given 3 lemons. Now I can definitely smell the lemon fresh scent. And I would imagine that each lemon must be bringing with it a ton of moisture too. The big concern, since lemon is one of those no-no type feedings in the worm bin, people are always like, oh no, all the acid, the citric acid is going to make it, dangerous for the worms or whatever. They won't be able to eat it. I don't know. I've often fed systems where I had previously placed in oranges or other citrus, and eventually the worms are able to approach this stuff. Maybe in the beginning it takes some time or whatever for some sort of chemical processes to occur and lighten up on the acid or whatever the case may be, but in time they'll make their way in there without a problem. It did feel to me like those lemons were sort of deteriorating pretty good. They were almost like mush in my hands. So I don't know how much of that we're going to be able to see the next time we come back in here, another couple weeks from now. So I'm glad to see that it's kind of breaking down on its own, even if it's not getting gobbled up yet by the worms, but I think it's just a matter of time, really. So we'll position our coffee filter over our freshest, most recent feeding that they're getting today. But since you saw some of the stuff they're getting is coffee, including new filters, one thing we can do with this old filter that's been in here for some time now is contribute to the bedding supply in the system by just throwing this thing in here as additional bedding. I just tear it up into little shreds. Obviously not as nice and small as my shredder makes it, but still useful in the worm bin. So now here is where the grapefruit had been placed 28 days ago. And last time we still saw each half of the grapefruit somewhat intact. One of the halves, at least in one of the systems, I remember it was obvious that one of the halves was still kind of holding out pretty good, resisting breakdown, but the other one in that same bin had already shown signs that the worms had occupied the rind of the grapefruit and were in there nibbling on it. I gotta tell you the truth, I don't feel anything. I mean, I wasn't really trying to be super delicate to make sure I don't break something that would be able to stay intact if I was careful. It's not what worm farming is about. Using kit gloves to work on your worm bins, or at least I like to think that you can be pretty, rough, without being aggressively, destructively rough, but you can be pretty rough and these worms can handle it for the most part. But I would have to say for the most part, I don't know what we're going to see in the other systems, but it does seem to me like bucket number 1 has finished off what was given to it as far as grapefruit goes. Let's throw some of this nice dry stuff that's out on the surface down too, because you'll remember one of the things I want to add is the BTI liquid, right? So why don't we already start drizzling, oh my goodness, some of it down in here. I still haven't really mastered applying this stuff. I don't know, it would be nice to be able to, spray it somehow atomized, but for now I think we're okay just getting it in here in any old way. It's bacteria, so it should really, spread beyond where it's been applied into the rest of the bin, so I'm kind of counting on that happening. So let's see, try to be fair here. I've got 3 banana peels, that makes it easy that each bucket gets 1. But as far as the blackberries and the strawberries here, let's see, I'll try to be fair when it comes to this stuff too. It seems like we've left enough for the other 2 systems. Let's not forget, we've also got some coffee to sprinkle in here, but you know what? Before we put the coffee in, let's also administer a little bit of this pulverized eggshell, which is what I use as grit in my systems. I'm also dropping in a little bit more of my homemade bedding. I always try to be pretty generous with this stuff. And then when I get a big pile of that stuff, I always feel like I could dump coffee right down into this stuff, and then it's going to blend in nicely with the surrounding bedding, and none of the coffee is going to sort of hide in a big pile. It's all fair game for food, for being eaten. I think we put some of my worm chow in here last time, but I think with all this stuff that they're getting, a whole day's worth of coffee as well as all those yummy fruits, I think today we'll just skip on giving this system chow. I've been pretty generous with the chow too. Almost every system has gotten it ever since I instituted it in my systems as a feeding option. So it's kind of weird that I'm not putting any in here now, but I think the system will do quite nicely. I think before we cover up here, I want to put a little more BTI on the opposite side here too. Let's give it a little bit of a drizzle here and try to save enough for the other 2 buckets. Somehow in these systems I never feel like I'm observing lots and lots of worms mounding up on stuff or piling on, but somehow it does seem like the castings keep piling up nicely and the food diminishes. So they're clearly in there doing our work for us, but somehow they're a little bit elusive, wouldn't you say? Alright, same thing here. Let's just keep going with the same theme now that we've already run the whole thing through a dress rehearsal in bucket number 1 here, and bucket number 2 we can probably get the job done a little bit more quickly if we don't let ourselves get overly distracted. That's usually what causes me to slow down a little bit, is just me gawking. Once again, very similar. Obviously, we're managing these systems in very similar ways to each other. Just wondering if we can come at this a little bit more carefully to get a better sense of how the worms are taking to this stuff. I mean, Here I can already see worms hanging out on the lemons. And boy, does it smell good. I just wonder if we kind of scoop one out and examine it a little bit more closely. The stuff is certainly not as damp as I thought it would be, with a whole bunch of lemonade poured on top of it. Somehow it just doesn't seem like the moisture has escaped. It's just sort of sitting within the lemons. So instead of escaping and dripping down, it seems like the worms are going to have to come over for it if they want it, and access the moisture by taking it from the lemon rather than just having the lemon offer it up, if that makes any sense. But once again, I feel like I've really just probably destroyed these lemons by trying to check them out, because they are really soft and they just seem to fall apart in my hands. It was interesting to see how things are progressing with the lemons. Most important thing with that, I believe, is always that the worms are not just completely put off by the stuff and repelled by it. The fact that there's some worms in it already suggests that in time it'll get there. Here too, I'm wondering if we're going to be able to spot anything that resembles a grapefruit on this side. Seems after 28 days it's probably a little bit unlikely. Once again, I'm getting a little bit rough, but I don't think I'm doing anything that's going to injure the worms. It's just that my access into these buckets is a little bit different than what I'm used to. So to get the leverage I need down low, I've got to sort of reach in an unusual fashion from above. But I think we've created enough space here to pile in today's feeding. How does that look? I think it looks good. I think last time too we just grabbed some of this bedding we found out on the surface. Seemed a little dry. It was probably nice and seasoned, onto which the yummy feeding can get piled on. And oops, gotta save one for the last system. Alright, I think I've preserved enough of the remaining food to be fair for all three buckets. They're all more or less getting the same feeding here. Once again, we'll put in a little bit more bedding before we pile in the coffee. That's a nice portion. Always like to be generous with the bedding for the wormies. If the worms sense that they've got plenty of space to occupy, then they do just that. Just don't remember, did we put anything on top of the bedding / coffee at the end, or was that the whole feeding? Oh, let's not forget the BTI. It's kind of a new thing. This is the first time these buckets are being treated by it, but it's because of the 14-day interval between feedings. Some of my systems have already gotten their second treatment of the BTI. Some of my systems that get fed every 10 days or so. There again, the only reason I'm sticking to any sort of feeding schedules is just for a degree of consistency to help make the videos and tracking of the systems a little bit more interesting. You can always count on sort of a consistent interval between feedings. Okay, I'm saving a little bit of the BTI for the last bucket, and then we can get in there and feed them too. We're almost done. Where's the coverings for bucket number 2? Here it is. It's always so easy to find because bucket number 2 has a piece of cardboard that says number 2 on it. And last but not least is bucket number 1. Here too, it's pretty much more of the same. There wasn't much to see with the lemons, but I guess curiosity is just one of my shortcomings. I just can't resist peeking in here to see if there's anything different going on in this bucket here. I don't see any reason to think there would be anything significantly different happening down in here. Perhaps just a few more worms visible down within the lemon than we saw in the other 2 buckets. But who knows why that would be, I don't know. Perhaps these lemons were just a little further along in terms of their breakdown or something. There were a couple I remember that were very, very rotted already. Pretty much spewing out their lemonade juices right there in my refrigerator. So I figured it was high time to preserve all that juice, lock it up, and freeze those lemons until such a time that we can give them to the wormies. This is something I don't remember feeding. These are the shells of some mangoes. Coming along pretty good though. Oh yeah, let's use the new coffee filter to indicate where we last fed. Tear up this old one to supplement the bedding supply in here. As you can see, I've not been skimpy on the bedding. I'm hoping that the worms react accordingly. And there again, I can't say that the proper reaction should be this or that, but I'm sort of expecting that the reaction would be that the worms sense the growing space that their little colony is able to occupy, and that they try to fill it with babies. So let's hope that happens. Here I smell a little citrusy something. It could be the grapefruit. I don't know. For me, it's more about finding sort of a visual sign of it, not so much just sensing its odor. Oh, what's this? I felt something larger in here, but I think it's just a few chunks of bedding stuck to each other, unless this might be a little piece of grapefruit rind. Is it possible? I guess anything's possible, but I believe for the most part we could probably write off that grapefruit after 28 days as being eaten. Oh, this must be grapefruit. Quite a large piece for that matter, no? So that would have to tell us that all the bins probably have similar leftovers in them still. So what do we got left? Let's get the banana. The fresh bedding. Oh yeah, some more fruits. The last of the fruits for that matter. A little bit of grit to help with digestion. And maybe just a little bit more bedding, since the bedding is what I like to pile the coffee into, if possible. Sort of spread it into the surrounding materials if possible. And that's that. Oh, geez. Once again, I almost forgot. The BTI. Make sure each of my systems is nicely treated. And hopefully in time we'll be done with the little fruit flies and gnats that have been plaguing my wormery for some time now. It does seem like this stuff's working, I gotta say. So, I think the only thing left here for me to do is to get things cleaned up and put away, but I'm not going to waste your time with that. Before I go though, let me really quickly say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.